You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you. Your movie moved me. That's because it had resonance with their life. You can't just, write about some stupid crap that happened to you. If it doesn't matter to an audience, why are you doing it?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. The blog post about the McKee seminar is up. I didn't know how much depth people wanted for me to discuss, so there's a lot of broad strokes in there. It just covers all the 4 sections of the 3 days I was at that seminar. If there's any questions or if you ever want me to go into detail about anything, just drop me a line at davebullis.com or tweet me at Dave_Bullis and just ask your question and I will answer it to the best of my ability. Just a friendly reminder, if you like an episode, please share it. If you ever want to help the podcast out, please use my affiliate links that are in the show notes. And on this week's episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast, our guest is an award-winning screenwriter and director. His low-budget film, Jane Doe, starring Calista Flockhart, won Best Feature at the New York Independent Film and Video Festival. 6 of his screenplays have been optioned, and he recently wrote and produced the micro-budget feature, Chat. He is an adjunct professor of screenwriting at Columbia College, and his new book, DIY Filmmaker, is available on Amazon and elsewhere. So here we go, episode 111 with guest Paul Peditto.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Hey, Paul, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Dave, how are you? It's good to meet you.
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And, Paul, how's the weather out there in Chicago right now?
I have to tell you, I'm smiling because it's like 65 and the sun is shining. Who would believe it? Because yesterday I had a sweater on.
Yeah, it's like 40 degrees right here in Philadelphia right now.
Yeah, it's been brutal here, but it's Chicago, so people just equate brutal with normal,
Chicago winters, man.
Yeah.
So, Paul, just to get started, you have such a great career. You've had this amazing film. You have with Calista Flockhart. You've just released your own book. I'm going to get into all that great stuff. So, just to start at the beginning of all this, how did you get started in the film industry?
That was I was a playwright for about 20 years. And my brother started a theater company called Igloo in Chicago, which is how I ended up in Chicago all these years ago. I came here in like 88, and I've been here ever since. So we had our theater company, and then Chris kind of got moved toward film, and my very first script was called, this is something you can't put on a marquee, a fire was burning over the dumpling house one Chinese New Year. So we shortened that to Jane Doe. And it was about my girlfriend who died of a heroin overdose. So it was a pretty powerful script. And so we just changed it over to a movie script. I had no training whatsoever. And, of course, I was still working in Atlantic City back then when I first wrote it. I was working for Donald Trump, if you could believe it, at Trump Castle. And then came to Chicago, did the theater thing, and then Chris said, let's do this low budget for a movie. And I just wrote this script, and it ended up being pretty good, and Calista Flockhart ended up being the lead. This was before she got Ally McBeal.
Oh, wow. I mean, I have to ask, though, Paul, before I ask about the Calista Flockhart, I wanted to ask, did you get to meet Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I saved the casino once, $10,000 pass post, and I got made Employee of the Month, and I met Ivana Trump. She's pretty plastic, man. I mean, she's completely plastic. Like, I think she's an alien.
Did you ever think at that point in time that, now that guy, Donald Trump, would be running for president of the United States as the Republican nominee?
I know. Can you believe it? They walked through the joint. I remember when it first opened in like 86, they walked through the joint like a king and queen, and she wouldn't open the place because she didn't like the color lavender in the baccarat room. So she cost people 5 days' work because they wanted to change the color of the baccarat room. You believe that?
Yeah. I've heard stories like similar about Donald, though, about like when he comes to the casino, there's like a procedure to about everything about how you're supposed to act around him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're on pins and needles, and he's just he's a fraud royalty, man, because he ran that business into the ground. How many casinos did he have to close in Atlantic City?
I actually had a friend of mine who lived near Donald, and he said Donald Trump, he said, would refuse to shake people's hands for years because he was like a huge germaphobe. And also he just thought that he was in like his own little world. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was own bubble, and he would just like not get anything that was going on around him. You know what I mean?
Well, he is in his own bubble. So he is right about that.
So Paul, you were a playwright, and, you wrote this film, Jane Doe, and, you sort of wrote that. I mean, did you write that in so like the spare time that you had, or were you just, writing this, as like a full-time gig?
No, hell no. I wrote the play in 3 days right after she died. It was pretty emotional. And then I had zero training for this. I mean, I never took a writing class, and this was even before. I don't even know that there was even Word at the time, let alone Final Draft software. And there was no internet for me, so I couldn't just go on to IMDb, and find scripts. So I just kind of, made it up as I went along. But the story was strong enough that it attracted a lot of attention. We had some pretty heavy people come in on that, because eventually this company called Unipix came in. So our little $90,000 micro budget turned into like almost a $300,000 movie.
Oh, wow. Did you ever think though that it would become to something like a $300,000 movie?
No, never. We just, I just wanted to do something to honor her, and keep in mind, like, I had never set foot on a film set. And my brother and dad, who were the primary producers, got the brilliant idea to make me the director of this movie. And, I think you want as your director someone who's previously set foot on a film set.
Yeah, it's something I've talked about that before with first-time directors. It's almost as if the director needs no experience, but everybody else does. And that's sort of like the joke that some of my filmmaker friends and I have, because, they've been on sets before and they can tell immediately this guy's a first-time, this person, this, guy or girl's a first-time director.
No, that's right. And I had 4 ADs in 18 days, which tells you that there was very little guidance for me. There was no rehearsal time. It was not an easy situation, not an easy 18 days. I was usually playing handball with the PAs, and as the director, someone had to come fetch me, and it's like, Paul, the director is usually with the camera or actors, not playing handball with the cute PAs.
Paul, could you please stop playing handball for a second?
Yeah, that's right. And I actually slipped into the casino one time when my friend showed up. That was fun. They're like, we were right on the boardwalk filming, and I'm like, when are you going to be done with all this? And he's like, well, it's going to take me at least another 40 minutes. I said, well, you come look for me in the craps pit, okay?
Did he actually come look for you in the craps pit?
Someone did, yeah. Someone came looking for the craps pit.
Hopefully you didn't bet the whole movie budget on like a hand ring.
Yeah, I love Philadelphia. I mean, some of my family is from Philly, and of course I lived in Atlantic City for many years, so I have an East Coast connection.
Yeah, that's awesome, and because a couple of friends of mine out in LA, they always say they're always running into people from their own hometown, because now there's more people out there from Philly. And a friend of mine who's an actor, he just went out there last year, and he got off the plane, found where he was staying, and decided, I'm going to go down to the street here, just grab a drink. And the bartender lived about 2 streets over from him. They never connected, but they connected out in LA.
That's real cool.
Yeah, it's just one of those funny things, man.
Very cool.
So Paul, so when you were writing this, you have no training. You said you just sort of went into this. in writing Jane Doe, so did you write like an outline, or did you just go straight into writing it?
No, I went straight into writing it because, when I was a playwright, like I never outlined. I never understood what structuring meant. I never understood what writing to a niche audience meant. There was no calculation. All that has come later. And that was just instinctual. It's like, I'm going to honor this story. And so I just did my best to find the formatting, because this may have even been before the Screenwriters Bible. So I don't know. I must have looked at some kind of hard copy script and then counted the characters to see where the tabs went. And then I just tabbed it. I just tabbed the movie. It was before any of that stuff, any of the stuff that today you take for granted.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this too, because now you can go online and you can say, I want to see the script for Chinatown.
Instantly.
And it's like, instantly you can pull it up. And you mentioned the Screenwriters Bible. You can't see it because this is a podcast, but to my left is the Screenwriters Bible by David Chartier. That was actually one of the first ever screenwriting books I ever bought, because I was just mystified about the formatting.
Right.
And, it's actually a pretty good book, by the way. And, and I'll link to that in the show notes, everyone. But, but you're right, Paul. That was, I think it's on like its 5th edition now, and I think I have the 4th. So,
that's
it's a great book.
Good value. That book is very good value. I don't recommend too many screenwriting books, but I keep that book. That's actually a book we consult at Columbia College for my classes. It's very thick, it's very big, and you can get it on Amazon pretty cheap used.
Yeah, that's correct. And Paul, you read my mind, because that's actually what I was going to ask you next. Was you're a professor of screenwriting at Columbia College, so I wanted to ask what are some of the things that you tell students about screenwriting? Because you come from a great position because you've actually done it. You're not, just a person just talking about it. You've actually gone out, you've made movies. So what are some of the things that, you talk about, to the students?
Right. I teach locally here at Second City, Columbia College, up at Chicago Filmmakers. I also teach at Screenwriting University. So I teach a lot of Screenwriting 1 classes and Screenwriting 2 classes, break-in classes, and really it doesn't vary too much from location to location. You want to talk about character development. Then you want to spend some time on formatting. You want to spend some time on structure, which is really critical because it's not a novel. Like a novel could be 300 pages or 800 pages. With film, you want it to be 2 hours or less, right? You want your dramas to be somewhere between 90 and 100 pages, and your comedy around 100 pages, maybe even less. So, we got 100 pages, so we have to hit our marks and hopefully have a great story. So it's character work, structure. As far as story goes, we workshop it. We try to find the conflict, the essence, the themes, what someone is trying to say. People a lot of times, they don't even stop to think like, why am I even writing this? Because if you lose track of that, then you're going to bog down. You're going to get lost because you don't know what every scene is about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're very, very true.
Like with I don't know. You want character arcs. You want growth. People they don't think it out. Like I am huge on outlining now. It's my Linus blanket. I would never now write a script without outlining. And this micro budget we just did called Chat, I spent 3 months outlining it. But by the time I had the beat sheet and step outline done, like I could write it in 3 weeks because it was basically already written there in the outline.
Yeah. And that's, one of the other questions I had for you was, about creating that outline. Because, and you also mentioned the essence. So, when I assume when students come, into the class, they might have like a, what we usually call a seed idea. They have, hey, I have this, idea for it, and it's about a guy and a girl. And I'm sure, you have to, and Paul, you got to dig deep, You got to sort of extract as much as you can from that stone of an idea and say, what was the theme, et cetera, et cetera. So, is that, one of the things I wanted to ask is, do you teach like sort of how to extract as much from that concept by making them sort of brainstorm even further, like saying, okay, great, you have this idea about a guy and a girl and they go on this crazy adventure, but what more could we add to that so the conflict is always there?
Right, yeah, it's what matters to you as a person. A lot of times, if you're a millennial, and you're 21, you probably haven't lived that much, like you haven't experienced all that much. So, when I tell you I want the movie to be about something, to have some resonance, to connect universally with an audience. In other words, just because it happened to you doesn't mean it's interesting. Like, just because it happens to you doesn't mean it's a movie. It has to connect universally to an audience. For instance, Jane Doe, it got onto Entertainment Tonight, made a couple $1 million because it was a movie about addiction. And a lot of families have addiction. So people come up to me and, tell me, oh, my brother was just like that. Thank you. Your movie moved me. That's because it had resonance with their life. You can't just, write about some stupid crap that happened to you. If it doesn't matter to an audience, why are you doing it?
Yeah, so true, Paul. I have a funny story about that. I had this guy that got introduced to me, and he had a ton of, what he said were amazing stories. So, and he was older, and he was just about, 70s, maybe late 60s, early 70s. And, he was telling me he had these stories that he wrote out, and he's like, these would make amazing movies. And I said, well, okay, let me see them. And they were written as like, short stories, like in that format. And let me tell you something, Paul, I don't know what the hell. I mean, some of these were just run on sentences and like, I mean, literally, and it would just be like one long sentence. And I would say, there's nothing ironic. There's no like nothing funny or interesting that happens.
There's no there there. There's no there there. There's nothing there.
Yeah. And I told him this, and I said, I said, there's nothing really funny about any of this. And he actually had two stories that I said it'd be funny if you actually combine these, because I said one actually plays into the other. And he's like, well, that didn't really happen. And I said, I said, who cares?
So what?
I said, do you think? I said, no one's going to stop and say to you, hey, that didn't really happen. Therefore, I'm not going to watch this.
Yeah, this is it's a very important point, and it's something nobody told me on the set of Jane Doe. Because when I was filming that movie, I'd never been on a film set. So we went to scout locations in Atlantic City. And, of course, I went to all the places my girlfriend and I lived. And I insisted that's where we're shooting. Because I didn't have a clue that, like, this wasn't a doc. Like, the audience doesn't know we lived here. And they don't care. You can't make your fictional thing, you can't pretend that it's a doc. It doesn't matter if it happened that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was one time where I had a scene where my girlfriend stashed drugs in a ceiling panel. And I remember Calista on the set was like, I don't believe that. Like, that doesn't make sense. And then my answer to her was, yeah, but it happened. But that's not an answer. Like,
yeah,
that's not an answer, because an audience is going to say, I don't know about that. It doesn't matter that it happened.
You're right. It has to make sense for the story. It has to make sense for the characters.
Yep.
So somebody once said to me, sure, things may have happened to you, but audiences won't know in what context that happened to you.
Right.
So, if you have like a crazy Uncle Fred, and crazy Uncle Fred got drunk and fell into the Christmas tree, maybe
right.
It might make a funny story, but you gotta build something to it. You gotta build.
That's right.
So I told just to back to that story I was telling about that guy. I finally said to him, I said, if you want me to sort of patch these up, but I said, you got to put these, you got to do something different. And I haven't talked to that guy in probably about a year. I never heard back from him. So maybe maybe he realized there was no story in any of that stuff.
Oh, I don't know. I think he probably still feels there's a story, but that you're an idiot who couldn't recognize it.
Yeah, he did. I didn't recognize the
genius
stories. Exactly the subtext
genius.
of why. Yeah, and why those stories are so hilarious.
Yeah, that's right. I get that all the time, having 80 students a semester. Believe me.
So. So do you have any that you could tell us, any funny student stories like that?
Of someone who felt their script was genius?
Yes, and they thought you couldn't see the genius?
Oh, I don't know, because those people just split my class and leave me bad notes on ratemyprofessor.com. But I do have a red chili pepper status on Rate My Professor, I hear, so that's good news.
Oh, that's good. I was in a screenwriting class, actually, when I was in college. It was an elective, and I was like, hot damn, I'm going to take this thing. And I knew the teacher, and he got handed in a screenplay by one student who very rarely ever showed up. And he was like, Dave, look at this thing. And it was about two friends living in a frat house, and that's all the script was. And he was like, there's nothing to it.
Nothing
and this
there.
kid thought... Yeah, and the kid thought it was genius, man. Like, he's like, it thought it was genius, and it was, they were, basically the whole thing was the whole story was them as they're preparing for a kegger for a party, and the party, and then the aftermath, and that was the whole story.
Yeah,
and he's like, nothing happened.
There's nothing there. Yeah, it's an important discussion to have in terms of film school. It costs so much nowadays. Columbia keeps going up. It's $25,000 a year now, but that's half the price for UCLA and USC.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself as a young person, like, am I really going to film school? I had some people at Second City ask me that a couple months ago. They're like, those people are crazy spending that kind of money. It's stupid. What good is having a degree in screenwriting? And I'm like, I agree with you. And then, no more than an hour later, she was like, yeah, but how do I meet people? And I'm like, you go to film school. Why do you think UCLA can charge that? Because they've got staff, alumni. It's a giant placement service into the business. That's why you ante up $50,000 a year. Those people aren't stupid. They want to get in the business. You go to AFI, or Chapman, or you go into the heavy places, NYU, because they've got Oscar winners up the butt and can put you into internships and launch you into the biz, because it's all about relationships, as you know.
Yes.
So that's why people go to film school. Writing, Dave, is not a hard skill. Hard like a plumber, like a skill you say in as a DP, a sound person. Who do you have to pay every single time? You have to pay the sound guy. You've got to pay them. You don't have to pay the writer every time. I didn't get paid on this last movie because I wanted to see it made for $50,000. There was no place for giving me $5,000 or $10,000. You can't give the writer 10% of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to pay the sound guy $200 a day if you want a movie. So there's some skills on the set you have to pay. So that's why you go to film school.
And I wanted to ask, about that. You were talking about, paying all the crew and stuff. So, when you're, teaching this, and I know you do the different workshops as well, is that something that, you tell some of the students too, is because, write, a guerrilla budget feature, a low budget feature, a micro budget feature.
Mm-hmm.
And, that way you can keep the cost of the locations low,
right? Because
you have to pay these guys.
That's right. I never used to bother myself with this as the writer. Never in a million years. That was someone else's job, right? But you have to bother with it. If you're making micro budget movies, you have to know who gets paid on the set and where can I cut corners. I talk about all this in DIY Filmmaker, my book, in terms of 10 rules for writing the script cheaply. It goes back to the old, one of the first rules is be a producer when you're writing. Like, get into the producer's mind, know what things cost, and then reverse engineer it, figuring out what you have for free, and then you write that into the script to try to make it cheaply. You have to be concerned with the production side of things, even on the script level.
Yeah. Because I've dug myself into a hole a couple times, Paul. I would, was able to finagle locations, and then you're sitting there and you're going, wow, now they want insurance, and now they want,
right.
this and that, and we can only shoot at like 2:00 in the morning, and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking?
Right, I know. Yeah, or you need a contingency, right, just in case something happens, which it always does. Yeah. What do you got, a 2% contingency or a 10% contingency in case something happens? Or you're writing exterior night shots into your script, and then you realize, like, holy cow, I can't use any of this dialogue because there's sounds all around that won't match when I get into the edit room.
Yeah, it's like Roger Corman once said, if he ever saw a script that said exterior night, he would just throw it away.
Beautiful. Yeah. Roger Corman, he's in my top 10 list. He mashed up well-known genres. In other words, that's what you want to do. You want to be original, but you need a genre that always works, like horror, but do a mashup like, well, they do horror comedy all the time now. But what can I slash horror with and shoot cheap, right? I mean, you can't do a period piece cheap. Mm. What would work with horror if you write horror well? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because Dov Simons, he once said, the best movie that he always recommends is make a modern day horror film where you put 7 kids in a house and kill them all one by one. Yeah.
Dov Simons, he's crazy. Yeah, so it's just it depends. I mean, I recommend doing micro budget because I got tired in LA. I made a couple movies, but I got tired of waiting for them to tell me I was good enough, waiting for them to hand over money to me because it's always about money. I just got tired of not having control of the process. You know what I mean? And so I just started thinking, I'm just going to start making super small budget movies, even, short films or web series. It doesn't matter. Like, I'd still get my content out there, be creative and be proactive. Maybe something would hit and then it would develop an audience, and then I could either monetize that or get an agent or manager from that, but not just sit there and wait for money to come in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I think now with the whole digital revolution, you can go out and we can make our own movies. You don't have to wait. You can, on episode 99, I had Morgan J. Freeman on, and he always used that term, greenlight yourself.
That's right.
And that has stuck with me because now, and like we're talking about, the minimum locations, no kids, no pets, stuff like that.
Yep.
One thing, I found funny too, Paul, it's a little quick story. I actually shot a movie at Eastern State Penitentiary, which is, infamous, and, it's kept in that state of ruins on purpose for a couple different reasons. Mm-hmm. Well, we shot a movie there on death row. Well, it ended up, we just needed one room. So what the problem was, the room looked awesome, but the issue was I ended up, shortly as we were filming the movie, I actually made friends with this park ranger who ran this. In the middle of this park was this old colonial mansion, right? So I asked him out of just curiosity. I said, "Do you have an old decrepit room I could use?" He goes, "Follow me, Dave." So we go into this big mansion, right? And now we go through this grand ballroom, and he opens up this door, and now we're going down this old wooden staircase, right? So now we're in this like basement, right? So I follow him down, and it's not very well lit, and I'm thinking to myself, he's going to probably kill me down here. So anyways, so we're going down, and we go down a little bit further now. So now we're in like the sub basement, and he takes me to this room, and Paul, it could double as a old prison cell It's got these old brick walls that are like cut through, and it's all decrepit looking. I mean, literally, you could shoot a horror movie here and tell anybody it was anywhere, and nobody would know the difference.
So
it was
cool.
unbelievable. And I said, how much would it be to use this room? Tell me. He goes, you can use it for free.
So good.
And I said to myself, I could have shot the whole thing here, and not had to worry about a lick about Eastern State Penitentiary.
Yeah, that's a divine accident. It's it's pretty damn good. We had a trip for this chat movie we just did. We had a XXX chat office, sexy chat, and we needed a location because it was going to be 10 of our 18 days shooting there. And Boris Wexler, my director, lucked out and got to use his offices on the Board of Trade here in Chicago. So he had this super upscale office as this supposed, this supposed sleazy chat. So he added a whole different dimension that I could never have imagined. But the most important thing is you keep the single location, try to keep it to a single location if possible, or limit the locations and get them for free. Interiors, and sometimes you luck out because that saved us $10,000 or $20,000 having to rent space. You know what I mean? Yeah,
that is those, like you said, divine accidents, because those types of things. And I always keep those people in my Rolodex too. Like, I'm always making sure I go, in case I ever need that, and in case I ever jump on board as a producer, I always have this, grand Rolodex. It was unbelievable. And plus, you could use the woods too for free. And
fabulous.
It was so it was great. And but like you said, though, having that list, there was a Stu Makovitz who I'm hoping to have on the show. He always called it the Rodriguez list. Yeah. And he said, always make that list of things that you can get in a pinch.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's in his book. I mean, it's something micro-budget people have known for a long time. The thing about Rodriguez is he was shooting on film when he developed that. And I understand he's going to try to do another El Mariachi movie now in the age of digital. But he predated digital, just like Kevin Smith. Spike Lee's first movie would have been on digital, but he predated it. They were all in the indie revolution, early 90s. But now we got these tools. So that's why Sundance had a record number of submissions last year, over 12,000. Now that everyone can make these movies, everyone is making these movies, which makes it extremely difficult to get if you have no names, extremely difficult to get distribution.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a couple people about that. They had some different opinions of thought about, what to do in this age where everyone now is a filmmaker. Basically, the consensus was, in 10 years, we're going to be talking about this time. Like, man, remember when there was only 12,000 submissions? Remember those good days when there was only 12,000 and not, 50,000?
Yeah, that's hysterical. Yeah, we're fighting. We just had 2 nights at the Siskel Center. We were lucky to get it. We called all our friends and said, this is it. Like, this is our Chicago run. You basically have to do well at the film fest. I know people have said that's old school. That's an old school approach. But think about it. If you don't have name actors, if you don't get in film fests, how are you getting your movie out there? Because I'm not seeing a path. And if someone does know a path, please give me a ring and let me know. Because how do you draw attention to yourself in an oversaturated product marketplace? How do you say, see, I'm different? Come to this. How are you going to get on iTunes? How are you going to get on Netflix and Hulu?
Paul, I'll have to introduce you to my friend Jason Brubaker, because whenever he comes on the show, that's exactly what we talk about.
What does he say?
Well, he actually works for a distributor, which actually gets people onto iTunes and gets people onto Amazon and gets people onto, what have you. And he actually has a whole paradigm sort of, that he tells people of what to do to get their movie out there. And, basically it is, you have to set up a movie website and you have to go through your options. So basically, if your plan is to make a movie and go to Cannes with it or go to Sundance, he said that is a long shot.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so what he says is, he instead says, you'll have to have contingency plans, like we were talking about, where, if you are going to put, if your movie doesn't get into Sundance, what's plan B? What's plan C? And basically creating a VOD And then now the next form, like I've talked with Scott McMahon about a film trooper, the next sort of a frontier is now film marketing. And that's sort of where Jason and Scott, were talking back and forth about.
That's what it is, because even if Scott gets you onto iTunes, it's the same old issue. How do people in that giant forest find my movie, even on iTunes? Just because you get onto iTunes doesn't mean you're going to make numbers and people are going to see your thing. You still are going to have something that sets you apart. You know what I mean? Like Tangerine, look at how it did at Sundance. But even if it didn't do well at Sundance, it's like, oh, it's a transvestite, handheld transvestite love story movie. There's always an angle, right? Sundance has always got like something that hits that it's like, wow, that is a concept, right? Like that horror movie where you get killed within 7 days. That was
The Ring.
I'm talking about It Follows. Is that what I'm thinking of?
Oh, It Follows, yeah.
Yeah, like it's like a sexual disease, but it's a monster that's going to kill you if you slept with the wrong person last time. That's a heavy concept. So Hollywood, that's old Hollywood school of concept is king. Like, it doesn't even matter if you nail the script if, your movie is Snakes on a Plane. 4 words, Snakes on a Plane. Leviathan just sold the proof of concept. Now it's going to be a feature length. It's Moby Dick in space. This is massive high concept stuff that will work even on a micro budget level. That's what they've always been after, is that's original. Like, kill me with the concept,
Yeah. And Tarantino also talked about this too, because they actually asked Tarantino and Rodriguez on a film panel, and they said, Quentin, how do you stand out? And his advice, I'm sure, Paul, you could probably guess what his advice was. He said, go out and make Reservoir Dogs.
That's right. Write dialogue that nobody can write.
Yeah.
I talk to my students all the time, and I tell them action lines, because a screenplay, it's really not a mystery. Like, there's action lines and there's dialogue. And then there's like slug lines and transitions, but mostly it's action lines and dialogue. And if you could write dialogue, you're going to make money. Like, you're going to be Diablo Cody. You're going to be a hired gun making cash on other people's projects. You're going to get an agent, be brought in, pump up dialogue, and make tens of thousands a week. But you also have to be able to pump up the action lines too. Like, I need personality in the action lines. That's how to write a script. Like, let your personality seep into action lines. Like kind of Shane Black does. He's a radical example of that. The Tarantino does it too. He has great fun writing Kill Bill, and you should read those scripts to see how someone breaks all the rules, has fun, and still gets his movie made.
I've read a couple of Tarantino scripts, and I think, you could genuinely tell he loves writing those screenplays.
Yep.
And he definitely puts himself in there, like Shane Black, we were talking about. Shane Black definitely, he broke a lot of conventions. He even talked to the reader.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Remember, he wrote in the type of house that I'll be able to afford when this movie gets made.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's like he opens the suitcase and sees about as much money as I'm going to make when the screenplay sells.
It's funny too. Shane Black, I was just reading an interview with him. There was a period of 10 years where they said all he did was, he wrote and wrote again. This is when he was in his 30s to 40s, and he said literally he couldn't get anything sold or made. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I was the toast of the town 1 minute. I was 24, wrote Lethal Weapon. He's like, I partied for the next 10 years. Then he said he hit 34, and he's like, nobody wanted to have meetings with me. He said, he's like, what the fuck, And then he made Kiss Kiss Bang Bang finally, and then now he's back, because I hear the Nice Guys is phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's on top again. But he has talent, for your listeners, they have to decide, like, is this something I'm going to do? And then just gut it out. Like, you have to write for the writing's sake. That has to be its own reward at the start. If you're just in it to get famous or rich, to have the kidney-shaped pool and live the LA life of the 1%, like, you're going to be disappointed because chances are you ain't getting that. But if people really want to write about something that matters to them, that matters to an audience, that is much more likely that they'll succeed, so long as they have a thick skin and some talent.
Yeah, very true, Paul. It's like one time I was at a screenwriting competition / pitch, and one guy was, introduced to me, and he was a brand new screenwriter. He was about 50 years old, and he said, he's quitting, he finally wanted to do what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. And his first question was about screenwriting was, how much would I get paid if I wrote a screenplay? And I said, I said, you should do something else.
Yeah, that's right.
And he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, you will be miserable. You'll never write it either, because you're just going to be chasing this dragon, so to speak.
Right.
And he didn't actually love the craft.
Well, if you're going to make micro, you're going to make nothing, because that's what micro means, not paying the writer. So understand that right off. Like, if you're going for micro, expect to make almost nothing on the script. Then if you're going for the blacklist, trying to get on the blacklist, trying to get the agent, manager, the whole thing, the usual LA scene, understand, I think on Go Into the Story, that great blog.
Scott Myers.
Yeah, he's got these, a running total of spec scripts, and I believe in 2012 or 13, I forget it was, he counted like 65 spec scripts got sold total.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there were 60,000 some odd scripts that got registered with the Writers Guild.
Mm-hmm.
So your basic odds are at maybe 1 in 1,000. So understand that, people. Like, if that's all you're in it for, that's the old school LA. You read Deadline.com, you read Hollywood Reporter. It seems like there's deals happening everywhere. It's all part of the mechanism, the constant hype, the constant hope machine that gets you juiced into thinking, oh boy, I'm going to take meetings. It's going to be so great. And you're always so close. But then when people have to write checks or green light you, it doesn't happen. And then you're out years of your life. And, it's like, what? Holy cow. Because you weren't coming from the proper mentality that I'm a writer, I'm going to do this anyway, no matter what, because I have something to say about the world and the times I live in. You're grounded.
Yes, yeah, I can believe you. I agree with you completely, Paul. I just got a little tongue tied there. Yeah, I agree with you completely, and that's one of the things that I'm glad you mentioned, because there are people out there, saying, come to this screenplay seminar, come to this, blah blah blah.
Right.
There are a lot of people who, when I mean, now don't get me wrong, I've gone to those seminars myself, and I can pretty much within 20 seconds of meeting a person know if they're serious or not, or if this is just something they're trying to do, or if it's just like an expensive hobby. That is a fun phrase that I've learned when doing this podcast. Yeah. Other filmmakers, expensive hobby.
Yeah.
So Paul, we've been talking for about 40 minutes now. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So in closing, is there anything that we didn't get to talk about that maybe you want to mention, or anything you want to say to sort of put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
Well, I'll tell you, I would say if folks want to check out what I've done, check out Chat. It's online at iTunes, Vudu, Google Play, a lot of other places. You just have to search Chat online, so you'll be able to see my movie on a VOD context. I've got a book, The DIY Filmmaker, that's on Amazon. I've got another one. So I've got a couple of books out on Amazon if you want a guide on how to make micro-budget movies. And I've got a movie I'm working on now, and I went to an investor conference last night called The Tunnel, and it's a very interesting movie about a Syrian prison. We're trying to raise $2 million. And this is a movie about something. I was in a room with a bunch of Syrian doctors last night, and the way Trump is doing this Muslim ban, he makes these people out to be all terrorists and monsters, like a freaking Marvel comic book show. These people were highly intelligent, quiet, respectful, and there's a Holocaust going on now in Syria that we hardly ever hear in the news. It's just like these boat people flooding out of the country. We don't much think about it, but it's terrible because those people have nowhere to go, and it's a serious situation. So this movie we're doing is about a Syrian American who goes home to see his dying grandmother. He gets taken hostage. They think he's an American spy, and he's held in a prison for 15 years. So it's kind of like 12 years a slave, but it's more like 12 years a Syrian. You know, he's completely held hostage, and he barely survives. And we see him attempt to escape. So it's an interesting story, and I would say to your folks, please write about something. Like, this is a timely piece. I hope it happens. And it's definitely a weighty subject, and it's about something that matters. So at home, please, write about stuff that matters.
And I will make sure to link to that in the show notes, Paul. I'm going to link to everything, everything Paul and I talked about. I'm going to link in the show notes as well, and including to Paul's new movie that he produced. Paul, I want to say thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure because, like people listening to this, Paul and I tried to hook up before to do a podcast interview, and something happened with my recorder. So I'm glad we finally got to do this now. Everyone, it's DaveBullis.com to find me, and at Twitter, it's Dave_Bullis. Paul, I want to say thank you very much for coming on, sir.
Dave, it's been a pleasure. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. And I want to wish you the best of luck with everything. If you ever want to come back on, please give me a holler.
Thank you, my friend. All the best.
Thank you. Same to you, buddy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.